They say a mother's love is unconditional. But what happens when your own son looks you in the eye and tells you to die? I paid his debts, gave him my home, my health, my years. Then one day, I vanished from his eyes, just a shadow with a checkbook. But he forgot one thing. Shadows don't disappear. Sometimes they rise, and sometimes they take everything back. I was standing at the kitchen sink when he said it. My hands were wet, the sponge still warm from the dishwater, and the window in front of me was fogged over with steam. It was late afternoon, that hour when the sun throws long shadows across the laminate floor and the neighborhood dogs start barking at nothing. I had just reheated his dinner, a plate of overcooked chicken thighs and rice he barely looked at, and as he stood there, halfway in the doorway, he didn't raise his voice, didn't make a scene, just looked at me, like a crack in the wall he didn't have time to fix, and said, "Just die already, Mom." I don't give a shit. That's how he said it, like it was nothing, like I'd forgotten to take the trash out or overwatered a houseplant. I didn't drop the sponge. I didn't say a word. I just turned off the tap and let the silence fill the space between us. He stood there a moment longer, maybe expecting a reaction. Maybe he wanted one. But I wasn't going to give him the pleasure. He stormed out, slammed the front door hard enough to rattle the little porcelain angel hanging on the wall beside it, a gift from his third-grade Christmas fair. I used to think of that angel as sweet. Now it just looked brittle. I sat down at the kitchen table. The chair creaked under me like it always did, reminding me that my joints weren't what they used to be. The smell of old rice lingered in the air, mingling with the citrus cleaner I'd used that morning. I stared at the linoleum for a long time. It had a crack shaped like a lightning bolt near the fridge. I used to think about replacing it. But that afternoon, I thought, why bother? Let it stay cracked. Let it be honest about what it is. A few hours earlier, I had written the final check, $24,382.76, to cover the last of the debt he'd racked up on the house. His house. Technically. But the payments were mine. Have been for years. When he defaulted on the second mortgage, I took it on. When he maxed out 3 credit cards trying to launch a business, I covered the fees to keep the roof over his son's head. I've written so many checks, I could probably do it blindfolded, and all I ever got was a mumbled thanks if he wasn't in a bad mood. But today wasn't just about money. Earlier that morning, I'd driven out to the bank, wearing my good slacks and the cardigan with the loose button at the wrist. The teller, a boy who could have been my grandson if my kids had made better choices, smiled at me like I was there to cash in savings bonds for grandchildren's birthday gifts. I handed over the envelope, watched him tap on his little keyboard, and felt the kind of ache in my chest you don't take aspirin for. "That'll close the account," he said, not unkindly. I nodded. That's the idea. When I came back, the house was quiet. Kicked off shoes near the door, a cereal bowl in the sink. My son was in the garage, pacing with his phone, talking loud about liquidity and leverage, like he was on Wall Street and not 38, unemployed, and living off my Medicare checks. I didn't say anything then. I just made lunch and left it on the table like I always do. God knows why. He didn't eat it. I should have known the thanks wouldn't come. I should have known that debt paid didn't mean gratitude earned. Still, I didn't expect that. Just die already. There's something about hearing it from your own flesh that cuts different. Sharper. Deeper. I sat there at the table until the sun dipped behind the neighbor's fence and the light changed. I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't hurt. I was. But because there was something else rising in me. Something old and solid and sharp-edged, like iron that had been buried too long. I stood up slowly, knees cracking in protest, and walked to the hallway closet. Inside, buried under winter scarves and a broken vacuum attachment, was the fireproof lockbox I hadn't touched in years. I pulled it out, set it on the kitchen counter, and opened it with a key I still wore on a chain under my blouse. Inside was the deed, the one he made me sign for. Said it was just to help him qualify for the loan. Said it was a formality. Said a lot of things. But I was the owner. The legal, notarized, county-recognized owner. His name wasn't anywhere on that paper. Funny, how motherhood makes you forget you have rights, until someone reminds you that you don't matter. I picked up the deed, unfolded it slow, smoothed the edges flat with both hands, and stared at the signature at the bottom. Mine, not his, not ours. Mine. I looked around the kitchen, the fridge I paid for, the table I'd refinished by hand, the calendar with birthdays, marked in pen no one else remembered. And I thought, this is mine too. And I'll be damned if I'm going to die before reminding him of that. The next morning, I was at the bank 5 minutes before they unlocked the doors. The air was sharp, early October kind of sharp, where the cold slides down your collar like an accusation. I'd dressed deliberately, slacks pressed, blouse buttoned to the collarbone, hair pinned tight the way I used to wear it back when I still had interviews to go to. I looked like a woman with purpose, not someone who'd been told to curl up and die in her own kitchen. The branch manager's name was Melissa, young, efficient, with lipstick just slightly too bright for 9 in the morning. She looked at me over her glasses when I handed her the folder. "I need to confirm ownership," I said, my voice flat but polite. She glanced at the deed, then back at me. "Mrs. Whitaker, this is entirely in your name. You're listed as the sole borrower on the primary mortgage, and I see a second lien was filed last year." She clicked around her screen. Though that one was suspicious, actually, filed online with a digital signature that didn't match our records. I nodded. Because I didn't sign it. That got her attention. I watched her eyebrows lift, just enough to register concern, but not enough to scare me off. She clicked a few more times and leaned back. "Would you be willing to file a fraud report?" "I already called your customer support line last night," I said. "But yes, I want it formal, and I want everything in writing." It took 30 minutes to fill out the paperwork. Melissa printed forms, highlighted places to initial, walked me through the language. If the signature was forged, this lien will be flagged and frozen until further review. And if it was your son, I didn't let her finish the sentence. It was. She offered me a look, part sympathy, part business. Once it's flagged, he won't be able to borrow against the property. No further draws, no refinancing. And if you choose to pursue legal action, I will, I said. Her fingers paused over the keyboard, then resumed. Understood. On the way home, I stopped at the post office to pick up a certified letter that had been sitting there all week. More bills, more threats from some debt collector who couldn't pronounce my name right on the envelope. I tossed it unopened in the trash outside. Let them talk to K. Evan. Not me. I'd done enough cleaning up after him. Back at the house, it was quiet. Too quiet. His car was gone, probably off chasing another half-baked investment opportunity, or maybe just hiding somewhere to avoid eye contact. Either way, good riddance. I went straight to the hallway closet again, pulled out the second file box, and opened it on the dining table. Inside were tax returns, payment records, scanned checks, a lifetime of paperwork I'd kept out of habit, and suddenly, I was grateful for every one of them. I started sorting. Utilities I paid, groceries I bought, the phone bill still in my name even though he insisted it was just temporary. Then I found it, the email printout from 2 years ago, the one where he begged me to co-sign the mortgage, promised it would be only for 6 months until his credit improved. He even signed it, not legally, just informally at the bottom. Thanks, Mom. You're a lifesaver. A line that felt warm at the time. Now it read like a warning. I heard the garage door rattle just after lunch. The dog, my dog, let's be clear, lifted her head from the couch but didn't bother to bark. We both knew the sound too well. K. Evan Chewy's. walked in like nothing had happened. Keys jangling, shoes tracking in wet leaves, sunglasses still perched on his forehead, like he was on his way to brunch. He glanced at the papers spread across the table and frowned. "What's all this?" "Documentation," I said without looking up. He scoffed. "For what?" "For court," I said, finally meeting his eyes. "Bank fraud, forged signature, misappropriation of funds." He blinked once. Just once. Then laughed. Short and ugly. "Jesus, Mom, you're being dramatic." I stood up, not quickly. My knees don't do quick anymore, but steadily. "You forged my name to take out a second mortgage." "That's not dramatic. That's illegal." His face twisted. "You said you were helping." "You've always helped. I paid your debt, Kay Evan." I said. "All of it. I sold my car, drained my savings, gave up what little retirement I had left. And you still went behind my back." He pointed at the papers. "You don't even understand this stuff." "You're 80, Mom. You sign whatever people put in front of you." "Not anymore," I said. "And I'm 72. He sneered. "So what? You're gonna call the cops now?" "They've already been called," I said. "And so has the bank. And next is a lawyer." His expression flickered. Panic, anger, disbelief, all wrapped into a scowl. "You're trying to ruin me." "No," I said. "I'm finally stopping you from ruining me." He opened his mouth to say something. Probably another insult, another threat, another sad attempt at guilt. But I raised a hand. "I want you out of this house by the end of the month." "That's legal notice. You don't own it. You never did. You've got 4 weeks to find somewhere else to screw up." He just stared at me, mouth open. "And before you threaten me again," I added, "you should know I've already called CPS. They'll be checking on Jake next week. So think very carefully about how loud you want to get." That did it. He muttered something under his breath. Probably vulgar. I didn't care. And stormed back out the door. The dog didn't move. I sat back down, the edge of the chair cold against my legs, and picked up the next paper in the stack. An old receipt for groceries from Costco. $217. All organic. All for him. I circled it in red pen. Let the lawyer see just how deep this went. 2 officers came by that Friday afternoon. Unannounced, but not unwelcome. I had just finished folding towels when the doorbell rang. Not the frantic kind, just firm, procedural. The younger one introduced himself as Officer Keller, and the older woman with him was Sergeant Dorsey. Both polite, both efficient. The kind of presence that fills a room without asking for coffee. "We're here in response to a fraud report filed through First Midwestern Bank," Keller said, flipping through a small notepad. "Says your signature was used on a second mortgage without your consent." I nodded and motioned for them to come in. The dog sniffed Dorsey's boots once, then retreated under the table, a solid endorsement in my book. I'd already laid out the documents on the dining room table again, everything clipped and labeled like a high school science fair. Dorsey raised her eyebrows, impressed. "You organized all this?" "I raised 3 children and managed my husband's hospital bills for 15 years, I said. "This is nothing." Keller smiled. "Would you mind walking us through it?" So I did. Every transfer, every signature I didn't give, every text message that suddenly felt like breadcrumbs. I showed them the original deed, the email where Kevin promised he'd fix everything, and the bank's notarized complaint confirming that the digital signature didn't match any on record. Dorsey took photos. Keller asked questions. I kept my voice steady, even when I got to the part where he told me to die. "He's still living here?" I nodded. "Not for long." "Is the child his?" "Yes. Jake, my grandson. He's 8. Sweet boy. None of this is his fault. Is he safe?" My stomach twisted, because I wasn't sure anymore. "He's never been hit. But he's seen too much. Heard worse." Dorsey scribbled something in her notebook. We'll have to notify Child Protective Services. It's standard procedure when a report intersects with a minor's welfare. I want him protected, I said. I don't want him to end up thinking this is what families look like. After they left, I sat by the window for a long time. The light had changed again, the kind of late afternoon gold that makes everything look warmer than it is. Jake was still at school, thank God. I didn't want him walking in and seeing a police cruiser in front of the house. Not yet. Let him have one more day of normalcy. That evening, Kevin returned like nothing had happened. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just dropped his keys in the bowl by the door and flopped onto the couch like it owed him something. I didn't say a word. I couldn't. My throat felt lined with dust and old shame. An hour later, I heard him on the phone in the garage. Through the vent, his voice carried, low, aggressive, filled with that particular male venom that pretends to be logic. She's overreacting. It's my house. I've been paying utilities. The bank won't do shit. She's old. She's losing it. They'll see that. That was the moment I opened my notebook. Not the legal one. My own. The one I'd started years ago in the back of a calendar. The one I now rewrote page by page. Money lent, errands run, hours logged. All the little humiliations I'd convinced myself were just what mothers do. I wrote down every date I'd picked up, his prescriptions. Every time I drove Jake to the dentist when Kevin forgot. The 3 times I covered his car insurance so he wouldn't lose the license he barely used. The night he brought a woman home drunk at 2 a.m, and I had to explain to Jake why Daddy's friend was crying in the kitchen. I wrote until my hand cramped. Around 10 o'clock, Jake knocked gently on my bedroom door. "Grandma," he whispered, "can I show you something?" He held up a folded piece of notebook paper, all crumpled like it had been in his backpack all day. Inside was a drawing, me and him, sitting under the tree in our backyard. I was holding a teacup. He had a book, and above us, he'd written in crooked, hopeful letters, "You're my safe place." That's when I felt it. Not grief, not guilt. Steel. That hard, quiet thing that lives in your ribs when you know what needs to be done and stop being afraid of doing it. I kissed the top of his head, told him to brush his teeth, and promised we'd read together tomorrow. After he went to bed, I called Linda from church. She answered on the second ring. "I think it's time I spoke to a lawyer," I said. She didn't ask why. Just said, "Good. I know a woman. Smart. Doesn't waste time." The next morning I called. The receptionist's voice was brisk, but not unkind. "Whitaker, Helen?" "Yes. We can get you in Wednesday. Are you filing for eviction or pressing charges?" I stared at the calendar. Wednesday was Jake's soccer practice. "Both," I said. "And maybe something else." The courthouse smelled like old wood and bureaucracy. Not unpleasant exactly, just dry, official, the kind of air that makes you sit up straighter without knowing why. I'd worn my navy blue skirt, the one with the hem I'd restitched last spring, and my black flats that still pinched at the heel. I carried a folder under one arm and a brown paper bag with a peanut butter sandwich and a banana. Linda told me court days could stretch. My lawyer, Janice Porter, met me at the security checkpoint. Short woman, sharp eyes, gray hair cut clean, like she didn't have time for nonsense. I liked her immediately. "Stay close. Speak only when spoken to," she said as we walked to the hearing room. "Don't react if he lies." Let me handle the lying. Kevin was already inside, slouched in a too-tight button-down, trying to look like someone with a job. His shoes were scuffed, his tie askew. He didn't look at me, just tapped on his phone with one hand and whispered something to a man who must have been his public defender, because Lord knows he didn't pay for representation. The hearing was about the fraud complaint, the forged second mortgage, and a request for immediate injunction on further financial activity involving the house. Janice presented the original deed, my notarized signature, the bank's confirmation of digital forgery, and a list of financial transfers I'd compiled. She said the word exploitation 3 times, loud and deliberate. Kevin tried to argue, said I was confused, said I'd agreed verbally, said I offered to help, and now she's punishing me for it. He even tried to tear up a little, said he was doing it for the family. Janice didn't blink. Is your client in possession of any written agreement granting him permission to act on Mrs. Whitaker's behalf? The judge, a tall, soft-spoken man with clear-framed glasses, looked over the edge of his reading glasses. Mr. Whitaker? Kevin shrugged. She's my mom. That's not a contract, the judge said, and marked something in his folder. We were granted the injunction. Effective immediately, Kevin could not make financial decisions related to the house. The forged second mortgage would be frozen pending investigation, and any attempt to remove funds would trigger legal action. Kevin stood up fast, chair scraping behind him. This is insane, he hissed. She's senile. She's ruining everything. The judge calmly raised one hand. Mr. Whitaker, unless you'd like to spend the night in holding, I suggest you adjust your tone. Janice leaned toward me as we stood to leave. That went well, she murmured. Next step is civil. Reclaiming damages. As we stepped into the hallway, Kevin's wife, or ex-wife, I'd lost track, was sitting on the bench, arms folded tight. She looked up at me, her expression unreadable. I told him, she said quietly. I told him not to drag you into this again. I didn't answer. What was there to say? Outside, the wind had picked up. I wrapped my cardigan tighter around my shoulders and let Janice talk through our next steps. Small claims, restitution, potential eviction proceedings. Are you prepared for the personal fallout? She asked as we reached the sidewalk. He told me to die, I said. I think we passed personal a while ago. I didn't go straight home. I drove to Jake's school and parked across the street, just out of sight. School was letting out. A tide of backpacks and sneakers and shrieking voices. I spotted him by the monkey bars, laughing with another boy, his coat unzipped, cheeks flushed. Alive, untouched, for the moment, by the courtrooms and paperwork and adult failures swirling around him. That night, after he was asleep, and Kevin had holed himself up in the basement like a sullen teenager, I stood at the kitchen sink again. My back hurt. My ankles throbbed. But I stayed there a long time, just watching the streetlights flicker against the window pane. I thought about the judge's words. That's not a contract. Damn right it wasn't. But what Kevin didn't know, what he still didn't understand, was that I'd just begun writing one of my own, in ink, with witnesses, and this time, he wouldn't be getting a single signature. 2 weeks later, the judgment came through. I sat at the dining table, same place I'd eaten my toast that morning, same table I'd once scrubbed peanut butter off when Jake was 3, and read the envelope from the court twice. Then a third time. Kevin owed me $89,421. That included the fraudulent mortgage, all verified financial contributions, and court-approved interest. Every cent I'd spent bailing him out over the last 7 years had come home, dressed in legal formatting and embossed with the state seal. Janice called the next morning. We filed a lien on his vehicle, and his bank accounts are frozen pending collection. If he contests, we go to collections. If not, we liquidate. She paused. He's already missed the response window. Good, I said. Start with the truck. It's in my driveway. Kevin exploded that evening. I heard him before he even made it inside. His boots slamming on the porch, the screen door yanked open so hard it clattered against the siding. He stormed into the kitchen holding the notice from the DMV like it was a burning flag. You're ruining my goddamn life, he shouted. No, I said calmly, folding laundry at the kitchen counter. I'm reclaiming mine. He paced, veins popping in his neck, voice rising. They're towing my truck, Mom. My bank called and said, I'm locked out of my own account. Not your account, I corrected. Joint with your business partner, the one who disappeared 6 months ago. You opened it using my address and tried to run debt through it in my name. It's in the complaint. His face went pale, then pink, then livid. This is revenge. That's all this is. You're bitter, and you're punishing me because I didn't coddle you. I paid your mortgage, Kevin. 3 years in a row. I paid your credit card minimums, covered your car insurance, and bought groceries when you were too busy to work. You said you wanted to help. No, I said. I said yes because you're my son. I wanted to believe that meant something. He threw the notice onto the floor and turned to leave. You're unbelievable. A real piece of work. You act like you're some martyr, but you're just a bitter, lonely old woman. I didn't flinch. I bent down, picked up the paper, and slid it into a folder labeled Evidence, Phase 2. As he walked out, I called after him, You have until the end of the week. Then I changed the locks. He slammed the door. Not surprising, 3 days later, I held a garage sale. Everything he left in the garage, the basement, even the patio, all of it went onto folding tables and into cardboard boxes marked with handwritten prices. His speakers, his camping gear, boxes of junk labeled electronics, still sealed. The neighbors came in waves. Some looked sheepish. Others handed me cash like they were happy to participate. What's this for? Mrs. Goldstein from down the block asked, gesturing toward a blender. Restitution, I said, pocketing the 20. By noon, I'd made over $600. Jake helped me bag smaller items. At one point, he pulled out a baseball glove I hadn't seen in years. Is this mine? He asked. It is now, I said, ruffling his hair. That afternoon, the letter came, not handwritten, of course, but a printed page in a manila envelope, scrawled return address in Kevin's messy, all-caps script. I opened it carefully. You've turned your back on me, it read, after everything I've been through. You're selfish. You never understood how hard it's been for me. You act like I'm some monster. But you're the one who's ungrateful. All I ever wanted was for our family to work. I read it once, then again. Then I walked to the shredder, turned it on, and fed the page through, one edge at a time. Later that night, Jake came downstairs in his pajamas, rubbing his eyes. Grandma, he said, can we have pancakes for dinner? We can have anything we want, I told him. This house runs on new rules now. He smiled and climbed into the kitchen chair. I turned the burner on and poured batter into the pan. The sizzle was louder than I remembered. Clean, sharp, full of promise. The next day, I went to the bank. Melissa, the same woman who'd helped me file the fraud complaint, greeted me with that same professional smile. I'd like to open a new account, I said. Savings. Just me. No cosigners, no family access, no favors. Of course, she said. What would you like to call it? I thought a moment, then smiled. Rebuilding fund. She tapped her keyboard. Perfect. And would you like checks? Not anymore, I said. Cash will do just fine. The new mailbox key fit with a satisfying click. I stood there for a second, hand on the handle, letting the moment settle. A small thing. A new lock, installed just yesterday. But it felt like a line drawn in chalk, clear and permanent. Kevin didn't have a copy. No one did but me. Inside were 2 envelopes, a medical bill from my podiatrist, and a local community newsletter with my name printed right above the words, Women Who Lead. I chuckled softly. I hadn't led much more than my garden club in recent years, but apparently, word of my court case had made its rounds through the neighborhood grapevine. There was something oddly funny about being considered powerful at 72. Back home, the house was still. Jake was upstairs, coloring by the window. The light was perfect in the afternoons, golden and quiet, the kind that made shadows gentle. The kitchen smelled like lemon polish and cinnamon toast. My kind of peace. The eviction deadline had passed 3 days ago. Kevin didn't fight it. He packed what little he had left, which wasn't much, and left without a word. No screaming, no speech, just a note on the kitchen counter that read, "I hope you're happy." I was. That evening, Jake and I sat on the porch steps with bowls of ice cream. The cicadas were humming, and the sky was doing that pastel swirl thing it does just before dusk. "Are we going to stay here forever?" Jake asked. "Not forever," I said, "but as long as we want. That's what matters." He nodded, solemn in the way only 8-year-olds can be when they're trying to understand the shape of life. He leaned his head against my arm. "I like it better now. It's quiet." "I like quiet too," I said, "but we can make noise when we feel like it." The next morning, I met with my estate planner, a no-nonsense woman named Sharon who wore thick-rimmed glasses and didn't waste time on small talk. "I want everything to go to Jake," I told her. "The house, the savings, what's left of the retirement. But only if he stays kind. If he turns out like his father," I shrugged. "Let the church keep it." She smiled slightly. "We can include that." I also asked her to revise the power of attorney. No more automatic assumptions. No more family entitlements. I'd learned the hard way that blood doesn't guarantee protection, just access. And I was done handing out access like Halloween candy. Back at home, I found Jake on the back patio, building a Lego tower that leaned slightly to one side. "Can we go to the library today?" he asked without looking up. "We can go anywhere we want," I said. That night, I got another letter from Kevin. He must have sent it before realizing the mailbox lock had changed. It was different this time, less anger, more sadness. He wrote that he was staying with a friend, looking for work, trying to get his life back on track. He asked if I'd consider seeing him, said he missed Jake, said he hoped I could forgive him when the dust settled. I read it once, then slid it back into the envelope and placed it in a drawer. Not the trash, not yet, but not out where it could reach me either. Some wounds don't bleed. They calcify. A week later, Linda from church called and asked if I'd speak at the next meeting of Women in Transition. I laughed, nearly dropped the phone. "Transition?" I said. "Into what? Senior citizen rage mode?" But I said yes. The meeting was held in the back room of the Methodist church, folding chairs in a loose circle, a box of grocery store cookies in the center like a peace offering. Women just like me, tired, capable, underestimated, shared stories that sounded all too familiar. When it was my turn, I stood slowly, knees still stiff but steadier than they'd been in years. "I thought being a mother meant always giving," I said, "and maybe it does, at first. But giving without limit, that's not love. That's erasure." I gave until I vanished. Then he asked me to die. A hush settled. "I didn't," I said, "and now I don't owe anyone my silence." Afterward, 2 women hugged me. Another asked for a copy of the court forms I'd used. One just said, "Thank you." I thought I was crazy. Later that week, Jake and I drove out to the lake. Just the 2 of us, a packed lunch, and a thermos of sweet tea. He napped on the drive back, head tilted against the window, mouth slightly open. I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. Tired eyes, a few new lines, but there was something else now too. A steadiness. A shape I hadn't seen in years. Freedom. I pulled into the driveway as the sun dipped below the rooftops, bathing the house in gold. Home, finally. Mine.